Hello everyone. Today we have with us the author of very interesting book called Swisstory. What's so interesting, you may ask? Because the book is all about the untold story and absolute real history of Switzerland. Meet the women behind this extraordinary, action-packed and adventurous non-fiction book, Laurie Theurer. Hello, Laurie. It's good to finally meet you.
Good to finally meet you too.
Congratulations on your book. It's really an amazing book. Definitely a terrific piece of work.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Tell us about yourself a bit.
Well, as you can hear from my accent, I'm originally from the US, from California, and I left at the age of 23. I joined the Peace Corps and went to Thailand to teach English as a volunteer for 2 years. Then moved back to California for about a year, met a Swiss man, and found myself shortly afterwards living in Switzerland. And I've been here ever since. I moved in 1996 to Switzerland. Yeah, so it's been a while. I work in the pharmaceutical industry. I manage clinical trials for about the past 21 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then in my free time, I write. I write for children, adults, poetry, flash fiction, everything under the sun. If it can be written, I write it.
Wonderful. So, how did you become a writer?
I'd always wanted to write, but I didn't really have the tools to do it. I didn't really know where to begin. And I dreamt about it for years. And it was so bad that characters would actually come up and not actually, but come up and tap me on the shoulder and say, "Hey, I have a story to tell. Would you tell my story?" And I'd be like, "Well, I don't really know how."
Mm-hmm.
And finally in 2012, I thought, enough of this. I'd like to actually learn how to tell these stories that are in my head. And so I went to a writer's conference in Geneva, and it all started there. I started writing. I found a critique group. I started with short works for children, so picture books and chapter books, middle grade. And one of the members introduced me to flash fiction, which, if you haven't heard of that, is just very, very short stories. So usually they're between 300 and 500 words, in which you either give an idea, give a moment in time, or you can tell an entire life span, but you're limited to either 300 or 500 or however many words the publisher is looking for.
Oh.
And yeah. So that really helped me with picture books, because in flash fiction, every word counts.
Yes, yes.
So I started with the two of those and branched out from there.
And Swisstory is your debut book, isn't it?
It is. I've been published in anthologies previously, but it's the first book of my own, yeah.
So how is the feeling of finally having your own book in your hands?
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, you dream about it. You think one day I want a book on the shelf with my name on it, and then it happens, and it's not quite real. It debuted in October 2019 and was out in the bookstores in November. I had my book launch in November 2019, and it still somehow doesn't seem real.
And what is your family's and friends' reaction to see an author within their network?
Well, of course, they're incredibly awed by me. No. No, I mean, they've been very supportive. Even my husband, who doesn't particularly like to read for pleasure, he likes to read more technical manuals, and he bought a copy for himself and had it signed and read it. And yeah, incredibly supportive. Yeah.
Wonderful. So, the title has been very interesting. It's obvious that it's Swiss story, but what made you get rid of the space between Swiss and story? Can you explain us about a little bit about the title?
Yeah, well, I mean, we were searching for titles for a very long time and trying to find something that fit.
Mm-hmm.
And Swisstory was the first thing that popped into my head, because it's about Switzerland. It's about history. And I'm telling the stories that the culture does not normally tell itself. Every culture tells itself stories about who they are, where they came from, why they are how they are now. And sometimes that can also change history and our understanding of our own history and where we come from. And so I think if I'm telling the true stories, the stories that the culture doesn't tell itself, and maybe it would open some eyes as to who the Swiss truly are, if that makes sense.
Yes,
And
yes.
so I started playing with the words and melding them together. And like I said, Swisstory was the first one that I came up with. And the publisher said, not sure about that. And we worked on the title. We threw out a lot of different ideas. And then in the end, they ended up coming back to Swisstory and saying, actually, it's a really good title, but we need to add a subtitle. And so they added on the let me just grab the book, The Untold, Bloody, and Absolutely Real History of Switzerland.
You actually thought of writing about the history of Switzerland? What made you so moved towards writing it?
I actually wasn't. It just kind of developed that way. I originally approached this publisher with an idea for a game about Switzerland, a word game. It's kind of a fill in the blank game where you would have a sentence with a word missing and a line there, and underneath it would say adjective or noun or plural noun or verb or whatever under the line. I don't know if you know if this game, it's very popular in the US, where then you have an entire story with all these missing words, and you have an identification of what the missing word is, and you ask the other people in the game who are playing with you, give me a verb. Well, they don't know what the story's about, so they give you a verb, and you encourage them to make it as fun as possible. Don't just say eating, do something imaginative with that verb, use something fun, and you write it into the blank. And then at the end, you have an entire story. And I was pitching that as a game. Originally, I was going to find a way to do it in German.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've studied some German, you know that it's impossible, because if you change either the adjective or the noun in a sentence, it changes other words in the sentence. And if those are pre-printed, it doesn't work. And so I thought, okay, I won't do that in German, but maybe I'll do it in English about Switzerland. And so I started writing those, and those are what I submitted to the publisher. And he asked to meet me, and we sat together over a cup of coffee for a couple hours, and he said, it doesn't work. I said, no, it does. It's not really going to be interesting. Let's try something else. Let's try an activity book. And so I tried to make an activity book. And he thought, yeah, okay, it's interesting. And one of the activities I had done was about a historical thing. And he said, you know what? Write me a chapter on the history of Switzerland. Just pick a topic. And so I wrote about that. I can't even remember which one it was. And he called me and he said, that's it. This wants to be a book about the history of Switzerland. And my first reaction was, I'm not a historian. And he said, well, give it a try. And so I started doing my research, which I love. And Swisstory was born.
Oh, very interesting backstory.
It was quite a development. It took some time. Yeah. But we found it in the end. And he was right. He was absolutely right.
Tell me about the research. How did you research? Did you interview people or did you read? How? What were your other resources?
It depends on the topic, but mostly, I would start off with an idea of, okay, well, I know this about Switzerland. What more can I learn about this topic? So, I knew about forced child labor, the contract children. I'd heard about that, and I wanted to find out more, and I wanted to dig a little bit deeper if I could. So I started with what was out on the internet, what I could find that was publicly available, and then off to the library. And other chapters, I would interview people. The chapter about the Alphorn, for example. There's lots of resources about the Alphorn, but not enough resources about what makes it potentially humorous. The Swiss are very serious about their Alphorns. And so I went and I talked to a man who lives not too far from here, who is an expert in Alphorns. He's been making them and playing them his entire life. And so I went and sat with him, and over a cup of coffee said, okay, thank you. You've explained so much to me. He loaned me books. He played the Alphorn for me. And I started explaining to him, well, this is going to be a book for kids. And I need to find kind of the disgusting side of the Alphorn. Can you help me with that? And he's like, what do you mean? And I said, well, I need something that's going to appeal to people in general, especially kids, though. Like when you play the Alp horn, does spit flow out of it? Or how do what kind of horns are made out of like animal horns? And what's disgusting about that? And at first he was really taken aback. But then eventually he got into it and then would give me some of the more disgusting facts that he knew about the Alp horn, some of which made it into the book and some of which I couldn't.
So how long did it take you to write the book or to complete the book?
Well, it took us about 6 months to find out what the book wanted to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then it took me an additional, I'd say, year and a half to write the 20 chapters, to decide what to write about, research it, first draft, second draft, third draft. And then, of course, the illustrator would need to start making some sketches. Mm-hmm. And I would then adapt the text. We would meet periodically, and I would adapt the text to match the illustrations and come up with some suggestions for illustration text. So we worked very closely together on those. And yeah, it took about a year and a half total, writing and illustrating and getting it to print. Yeah.
Wonderful. And about the chapters. Perhaps the chapters on William Tell and Ruthly's Ode maybe are the prominent, but to me personally, the chapter on cows was very astonishing. My perception of cows have always been this calm and harmful animals, but your book says otherwise. It's like truly shocking.
Yeah.
At least to me. So would you give us a little highlights on the chapter and what made you write about cow? Is it because it's Switzerland's most beloved souvenir?
Well, I think, my reaction to cows is the same as you. I mean, we live out in the countryside, and I look out my window and I can see 100 cows. I mean, it's just, they're beautiful creatures, and you think, oh, they're so sweet, and but it's all a lie. As you found out in the chapter about criminal cows. Yeah, no, I was trying to remember what got me writing about that. And I think I saw a film, The Verdingboer, the contract boy, about a boy who was sold into slavery. And one of the characters in the movie, I don't want to give away too much if you want to see the film, but one of the characters falls into a pit of cow manure and drowns in cow manure. And I was thinking, well, that was really, really horrible. Kids would be fascinated by that. Let's find some statistics on that. Does that actually happen? And it turns out it happens quite a bit. If people fall accidentally into the manure pits, other people might jump in and try to save them, and they both might end up drowning in the pit. It's really awful. And I was thinking, okay, well, that's one way that cows get people. What else? I mean, you hear about people being speared by cow horns, for example. How often does that happen? And so I just started asking questions, and looking online to see what I could find, looking on the libraries here to see what kind of articles are available as far as statistics of people being injured or killed by cows in Switzerland. And the number turned out to be a lot higher than I thought.
Wow. So was it easy to gather all this research work?
Oh, it's interesting. I love doing research. Absolutely love it. And asking a question and finding the answer in some way. It's what I do.
Wow. Just a curious being, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be completely honest, when I was a kid, I was always kind of the kid who was always making the poop jokes. I was one of those kids who was fascinated with poop and thought it was just the funniest thing in the world. And so this chapter was a delight for me to write, because I know kids who get this. And so the research was particularly interesting for me. And it's so funny because I went to the publisher with another chapter that I wanted to write about poop, which feels so funny to say this. But that dealt with the amount of gold in the sewer system in Switzerland. And it turns out there's a lot, but nobody quite knows the best way to collect it. And so the statistics and the information that was available about that was quite interesting. And I wrote up a sample chapter, and he said, no, not really. Let's find, if you need to get poop into the book, let's find something else. And so I found it with the cows.
Yeah. The book talks deeply about the formation years of Switzerland and also its constructive process of the current constitution. But it never mentions about the art and culture of Switzerland. Any thoughts on that?
It's a good question. I think what we were looking for, and we were looking for about 20 chapters from the beginning, and we had a list of topics that was wide ranging. And it had to be, number one, something I was interested in writing about, which of course the art and culture of Switzerland, very important. But it also had to be something that fit into the natural flow of the book, bringing it from the beginning of time all the way forward to current times. And I guess the topics that came up with art and culture, there wasn't the potential for humor, because, and maybe there was, but there was nothing obvious to us at the time. I think that's maybe why we didn't write about that in this book, because we were aiming for something where I could poke a little fun at the topic and the art and culture of Switzerland. I mean, I don't see anything to poke fun at.
Okay.
Yeah. But historically, and because this book is about the history of Switzerland, I mean, when most people think of Switzerland, they don't actually think of the art and culture. They might think of the Alps and yodelers and things like that. But otherwise, it's chocolate and cheese and clocks and mountains and Heidi and William Tell. I mean, these are the things that come to people's mind.
True.
And so I really wanted to expose the history and show that Switzerland was just as horrible throughout time, especially in the Middle Ages, as every other European country, if not more horrible in some areas. Like, for example, with the burning of witches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the most disturbing part of the entire book, I guess.
Yeah.
The rest all was really witty and very engaging, but that bit shook me a little to look at how many women were suffered because of just the prejudices or the myths.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
disturbing.
Exactly. It was pretty horrifying. When I was thinking one day, gosh, I wonder, the witch trials, I wonder if that happened here too. And I was so shocked to find out more executions of witches, male and female, and animals, believe it or not, which I didn't know about when I wrote this book, happened in the territory that's now Switzerland than any other European country. Yeah. And that was a bit of a shock. And then I needed to find a way to make it humorous, which, as you might expect, is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. But you have done an amazing job at it.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. So, as a writer, you must be already aware about the fact that writing is not the ultimate work. After it comes the editing and publishing part, which are truly very tiring process. Tell us your experiences with these two.
I think the easiest part about the editing process and the illustrating process is that the three of us, we got along so well. We understood each other, and our humor, we played off of each other. And we would meet, like I said, periodically, sit down, have a lunch or a cup of coffee, and pull out pages and start shooting ideas around the table. And so we took something that I wrote that was good, and between the three of us and their input, turned it into something really good.
Yeah.
To the point where, all three of us would be sitting around the table laughing at the idea of, okay, we could do it this way. And so it was really an enjoyable process. I think in total we met probably 6 times to go through several chapters at a time. And it would be usually marathon meetings of 3-4 hours where we'd be comparing text to sketches and changing up the sketches or changing up the text in order to make it more cohesive with each other. And the rest we all did electronically. So it just came together really easily, and wonderful people to work with make it really easy. Yeah.
Yeah, I can see. Michael Meister, an amazing work. He literally poured life into your words with his work.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, very thankful to him and his talent, and that he was interested in working on this book.
Yeah. So, did you also have to get rid of a few chapters, like with, as you mentioned earlier, with the cows, with the poop story? So,
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I would have to go back and take a look, but I'd say I probably wrote an additional 6 chapters that just didn't make it into the final book.
oh,
Yeah, and it's a trial and it's a trial and error process. I would try something, and it wouldn't really speak to the editor, who's Richard Harville from Begley Books, and he'd say, maybe try it this way, or maybe take this topic instead of that topic, and I just start over again. Yeah, and in the end, he knows what he likes, and he's usually right. So I had faith in him. Yeah.
so 6 chapters, it's a lot. Can you give us a little peek into what are the topics of the 6?
Well, that's a good question. It's been a few years now. I'd have to really go and look it up. I mean, I know there was the chapter on the gold in the sewers, which I was very interested in. I had started some other chapters, and I just, as interesting as the topic was, I couldn't find anything humorous about it. It was too serious, or I didn't get to the point where I was doing enough research where I could find the humor.
Oh,
but I will tell you the one chapter that made it into the book that I struggled with the most, if I can answer your question in a different way, and that was the chapter on World War II. And that was a chapter I never wanted to write, because I thought, how can you find the humorous side of World War II? And it's something that Richard Harville really wanted in the book. And it's the chapter I wrote last because I really struggled with it. And it took a very long time and a lot of research about what was going on in Switzerland during World War II. And most people just think, oh, Switzerland's neutral. There was nothing going on. People were just living their lives. And that's not true.
yeah,
they were surrounded by war.
That was my understanding. And I learned a really great bit of what was actually happening in Switzerland with your work.
Yeah, there was a lot going on, of course, politically, military, preparing the country for defense. I mean, it's when you're surrounded by war and being threatened by a dictator so powerful and so close to your borders, what do you do?
Yeah.
And yeah, the more I researched, the more I found. And then the real trick was, okay, how do I make this even remotely humorous? And so I hope I did without hurting too many sensibilities.
You did really well.
Oh, thanks. That was not easy. That took months.
Where can we find the book? Is there also an ebook available?
There's an ebook. They're both available on Amazon, which I know don't deliver to Switzerland. But the best place to get the book is directly from the publisher, which is Begley Books, Bergli, berglybooks.ch. And they send out books throughout Switzerland free of postage. So it's literally the cost of the book. It's also available in all bookstores, and if it's not available, you can order it. So Oral Füssli and Thalia and what other bookstores are there? Luti and basically Ex Libris. It's available everywhere.
Has it already made its way into the library?
That's a good question. I need to check and see. In our local library, I donated 2 copies.
Wonderful.
Just so it could be there, and I was very pleased to see they're always checked out. So,
thank you, Laurie. It has been a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for your time today. So, friends, that's the story behind the Swisstory. If you want to know more about the electrifying history of Switzerland, the legends, the myths, the facts, and everything in between, this is the book. This is the source. Swisstory by Laurie Theurer and illustrated by Michael Meister. Grab your copies today. Thank you and take care.
Thank you.